We have wrapped up talking about a difficult boss. Let's switch to power in the workplace. Sometimes the boss has it. Sometimes we can also find ways to get power. The first one is legitimate, nominal. This means name. They have power because they have the title of boss. It was handed to them. But we also can have expert power. Maybe you're the best at one area of your job, so people have to come to you to ask for help in that area. Or when decisions are made, they come to you. In a technical field like engineering, we call this a subject matter expert. They get to be in the room and be a part of decisions because they know so much. You can also have power through connection. Everything we learned in the last chapter about building a network can be beneficial to you having some leverage or power in your workplace. So when you need a guest speaker to come in, or you need a contract, or you're trying to expand your business, you might have connections that would make you powerful in your place. You can also have power through the ability to reward people with something. Maybe you can offer them something as simple as a thank you, or also just a digital badge, or however your employment's reward system is set up. Coercive power is toxic. It's a threat-based power system that says, I will not fire you if you do this, or I will only let you do this if you do this. It's really unhealthy. Referent power is interesting because it means you've been around a really long time. Maybe people like you a lot. So you have some leverage for people to listen to you because they like you and they want you to be happy. All right, let's look at communication in small groups. Just some basic characteristics. One of the things that happens is we have this term social loafing in your textbook that I want you to look up. It is something that happens because you're in a small group. Also, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but your book breaks them down, and you're going to need to know them because it will be helpful for your team project. But in all small groups, you should have rules. You should set boundaries in place. It builds trust. It's quicker to get to cohesion, and you have to communicate them. People don't automatically just know. Then we have norms, social norms, where if I came to your house and in your house everybody takes off their shoes, that's what we would consider a social norm. You have to communicate that to people who might not already know. Procedural norms, when you're meeting with small groups, you want to make sure they know, hey, we always start on time, or usually we're 5 minutes late. That's a process norm. And then a task norm is how you do something. So maybe in your group work or team project, you say we communicate on GroupMe, or we use email exclusively. Communicate that to your group. Make it clear from the beginning, but also as new people come in. You'll also really look at these roles, and I want you to look at this in the chapter. We have formal roles, informal role, task-oriented, social roles. So we have something task-oriented would be this person is the note taker, and social roles would be this person always brings a fun, or they encourage people, they bring energy to our meetings. Those are both helpful, but you'll need to know who's the leader, who's a note taker, who's posting things. When you define roles, it is easier to get things done quicker, and it brings you to a place of cohesiveness as a group. That means you've gelled, you're getting things done. It's so helpful. I want you to take a minute, because I have students every so often that will say things like, hey, I've never worked at a company, I've never been a part of a club, but I want you to think about your family as a group. Take a minute, and around your dinner table, the next time you're together, say, I have this class and we're looking at group dynamics. What would you say our norms are? What roles do we play? So we ask our kids who's bad cop and who's good cop, or who's the leader, who's in charge around here. It's really helpful to get a feel for that, and something as simple as a family, because as you go to work, you want to be able to identify those to communicate them effectively to other people. All right, we're going to look at some benefits of small groups. Why do we want to do small groups? Research says if you connect with someone in a class in higher education, you are more likely to finish your degree. That's why we do it. It allows you to develop some really good teamwork skills. When you have a small group, you have more resources than you did before. You can catch errors. You enhance what we call buy-in, or the attitude towards a decision, or the attitude towards an agenda. It helps give some social momentum to that process. Anytime you have more than one person, you have diverse ideas, different perspectives. It allows you to make better decisions, and you can solve problems as they arise better because you have more thoughts, more experience, more education. Two heads are always better than one. All right. When you have a small group, you need to know that there are stages to that process, and all small groups go through this. So when you come together, first we call it forming. You're forming your group. Then inevitably you have a disagreement. We call this the storming phase. Then we emerge from the storm, the conflict, developing some sort of norm. Now we've figured something out about ourselves and our process. And finally, we have the reinforcement phase, or they're performing. Now we can get things done. We've kind of walked through that process. All right, you're all going to be required to be a part of a group meeting. How do you make that effective? That can be really tricky. So let's look at a couple tips for that. Write these down. Look around the table and go, who hasn't talked? We want to encourage equal participation. Sometimes I'll ask students to bring their phone and set a timer and say, hey, we're all going to share for 60 seconds our idea. That kind of helps the one who tends to talk a lot, reins them in. Avoid throwing too much information at a group, or what we call overload or underload, where you say, well, here we are. What are we going to do? I don't have anything for you, right? Not helpful. Avoid groupthink. A theorist named Janice came up with groupthink that just said we got forced into a decision because a lot of smart people thought it was a good idea and we were all afraid to speak up. Groupthink is a phenomenon and a theory that we have really unpacked when something like a shuttle explodes or a bridge collapses, because we look back and think, were there signs? Were there flags? Did somebody think that the math was off? And what we find is there was pressure to conform. That's what we call the phenomenon of groupthink. Make the most of diversity. When you have different experiences, different education, different ideas, different perspectives, pull them out of people. All right, we're going to look at this, finally, this reflective thinking model. When you're in a group, you should constantly be asking questions, reflecting on the process. So this is so helpful. When you're in a situation with a group, you need to first identify what is the problem we're solving. That's sometimes a task at hand, but we have to get this done. We don't have a lot of time or resources. That might be the problem. Then analyze it, right? What are the different parts? Could we break it down? And then identify some tasks in the process. What are the boundaries? So if we have to put together a team presentation or a brochure. How long does it have to be? What is required? And then send people out. This is a great place for introverts to really shine and to go gather information. You don't need to talk about it. Just say, hey, can everybody go out and get 3 sources or 2 pieces of information? And then think about your challenges. I'm going to ask you to do in the middle of your team project what we call a SWOT analysis, where one of the pieces is what's threatening it. What is working for you and what is working against you? We call opportunities and threats. And then together start to say, let's figure out some solutions. What could we do? And then evaluate them. Is this the best one? Which one of these is the best one? And then you can really look at implementing the plan. And finally, at the end, you always need to follow up and say, how did it go? What did we learn? How could we do better? In the business world, there are so many terms for this. Total quality management, continuous quality improvement, the Toyota way. In basketball, we have deemed it the Mamba mentality. But it's impossible to get everything right, especially when you're dealing with people. But it is worth the work. So keep looking at your communication in the workplace, what your roles are, how you're showing up, and ask yourself, what are ways I can be better? I am 100% convinced that while sometimes it's easier to do a task ourselves, it is not always better. We're better together.